Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Antony Carpen here, just on one of the new housing estates, just around the corner from the railway station. I've just been up to Rock Road Library, having spent the morning reading some of the articles in the Cambridge News on all things Greater Cambridge City Deal, because we've got a very important meeting coming up on the 1st of September, which is a City Deal board meeting, which, according to the newspapers, is going to see the clashing of heads between the Smarter Cambridge Transport campaign and the Greater Cambridge City Deal over the future vision of all things transport. Now, as I said, I was in Rock Road Library earlier, and I wrote what was going to become, and probably will become, a blog post earlier, but I want to just shoot the short video on the issues on Cambridge's future vision and where I think it's gone wrong. So, to start off with, baseline and desired data sets. That's kind of a posh way of basically saying we don't have the information that we need in order to take informed decisions on a whole host of things. Now, I'm not just talking about transport here, I'm just talking about the whole city. Now, this ranges from things such as the number and types of empty homes that we've got here, and these include the cram college flats, the private students' halls of residence that are currently going up. There may well be data sets. In fact, there probably are data sets. There must be data sets that are held by the landlords and the property owners, and even on the council tax exemptions. But do we have them for the whole city? Do we have them for the different parts of the city to explain which areas where we've got an over-provision of them and which areas we've got an under-provision, so as to inform future planning policy? Second, robust data on commuting and tourism patterns. This is in particular for, and you see this with the youngsters at Cambridge Railway Station, where their trains that come into Cambridge are absolutely jam-packed, and there's no need for that to be jam-packed. So this is something that I hope transport campaigners will be chasing after greater angling, given that they've got the new franchise, to basically get some more carriages in, and then also say to the station owners to say, do something about it. The third one, patterns of coach journeys and deliveries. One of the things that we're seeing just across the country, in particular on the back of internet shopping, is the growth of big van deliveries that are happening everywhere. Now, one of the things I think that Cambridge University is experimenting with is basically saying to all delivery units is to deliver all of their packages to one single address, I think on the edge of town. Sorry, got something in my eye. To deliver to one single address on the edge of town, and then have the university's own facilities management to do the deliveries college to college, rather than just kind of like clog up the city's roads. Data on bus and train journey delays and overcrowding and underuse, again, for similar reasons as I've mentioned earlier. The other thing is patterns on how far people will travel to which leisure facilities. A few years ago, I took part in a hack day at Anglia Ruskin University, and it was very interesting to see how computer programmers were able to take hold of data from the junction and to find out the patterns of journeys that people made in order to visit certain types of shows. And I'm just thinking to myself, can that model be expanded to cover all of the leisure facilities in Cambridge, to see how that information can then influence future transport planning? Survey data on what Cambridge needs for the resident population. We've also got some past studies that have been done. In particular, I picked up one from South Cambridgeshire District Council from years ago, must have been about 10 years ago, basically saying what the leisure needs were for Cambridge. And one of them was a big community stadium in the city. Now, yesterday we got news of Cambridge United's plans, first of all, for the revamped Abbey Stadium, and also for the Sporting Village in Trumpington. A controversial planning application because it's on Greenbelt, but then from my perspective, Cambridge needs the leisure facilities for its growing population, because really since my teens, in the grand scheme of things, the leisure offer for the city has stagnated in complete contrast to the population, which has grown quite significantly. Also, things such as which organisations need funding. Now, for me, we don't have a system that very efficiently matches, for example, volunteers to voluntary organisations, to schools, colleges and universities with projects going on, matching to organisations that could do with them helping. Cambridge Hub have actually started are doing some pilot work on it, so it's really useful to have a look at that. Have a look at the link below. But it's things such as, given that we've got some very affluent residents here, we don't have a system that makes it very, very easy for otherwise time poor people to actually say, well, actually, can I just pull down a few drop down menus and find out which organisations need what amount of money for which projects that I might be interested in. Ditto having, for example, a hotel room booking system, style system for community venues. You've got Conference in Cambridge, which does all the main conferencing for the university colleges, but how about something that just expands the whole concept to cover church halls, or even kind of like, for example, the small community room around the corner that nobody knows about. So, Number two, after all of that, bloody hell. Information is not in a form that is accessible both to local policymakers and the public that want to scrutinise it. So, for example, we've seen a number of proposals that have been put up in relation to the Greater Cambridge City deal on buses and bus journeys, and yet we've got campaigners on the other side, in particular the Smarter Cambridge Transport campaign group, who are basically saying you are looking at a stupendous number of buses all trying to come into the town centre during rush hour, and it's going to be an absolute nightmare. We're at peak bus already. Plans to increase the number of buses coming in is not going to make things any better. Things such as being able to question some of the assumptions that were made, in particular on the initial assessments that the Greater Cambridge City deal made on all of the ideas that came forward. 3. This is particularly close to my heart. This is the lack of an historical context on what Cambridge used to be like, what we used to have but now don't, what we could have had but never got, and what we didn't want anyway but got anyway, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is what we used to have but now don't have. So, for example, the old Victoria Cinema. No, not the Victoria Cinema. It's the old cinema on Hobson Street, which is currently sitting there doing nothing. It used to be a buzzing community venue, but for whatever reason, it's not like that now. Can we change that? What we could have had but didn't have, I found out yesterday about the fun and games behind the new music halls company in Cambridge from the mid-1850s. Big plans for a huge theatre hall complex plus a 20-metre swimming pool. Didn't go ahead because a group of people called the Memorialists said, your scheme's not going to work, whereas our scheme for a big guild hall will, and in the end we got neither. Yeah, exactly. What else have we got? So we've got what we used to have but now don't, what we could have had but didn't get, and what we didn't want but got anyway. So you could turn around and say some of the big skyscrapers that went up around a time when nobody really knew how the planning system really worked, and things got steamrolled through councils anyway, that sort of thing. 4, this is a really big one. Jumbled up structures of local public administration. Now, we've got Cambridge City Council, we've got South Cambridgeshire District Council, which is kind of like over there on the other side of Trumpington. We've got Cambridgeshire County Council, we've got the Greater Cambridge City Deal, we've got Devolution East. No, I don't want Andrew Lansley as mayor. Parish and town councils. Who has the time to scrutinise all of those organisations, let alone have the time to work out and understand how all of those organisations function? And we haven't even started about Whitehall either. So, as you can see, for me, there is just a huge amount of confusion, and when it comes to some real difficult problems and persistent challenges in the city, there is no one organisation that is actually responsible for them. Instead, we're going to be having, assuming the government gets their way, we're going to have this executive mayor for Cambridge, who is going to be Cambridgeshire even, or Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, allegedly scrutinised by a scrutiny authority, which is basically a representative from each of the districts and county councils concerned. Still got the Greater Cambridge City Deal. we've still got the 3 councils and we've still got the town council, but then you've got things such as, for example, Health Watch and the county clinical commissioning group, the police and crime commissioner, and they're all in their separate silos, not talking to each other. I mean, say what you like about the Local Government and Public Involvement in Health Act 2007, which the team I used to be part of was working on when it went through Parliament, but at least it did have the duty to cooperate and a list of institutions that had to cooperate on the face of the bill. We don't have any of that now. What else have we got? So this comes on to, we've got the lack of real powers of any institution to deal with persistent problems. So what I mentioned earlier, now this for me comes back down to having financial powers, the powers to extract funding from the things that either supposedly bring wealth to the city or penalising those functions and activities that are having negative consequences on the city. So this could be, for example, residents would say student housing for private cramming colleges on the grounds that, and actually from my perspective, I don't blame the students here. It's not the students' fault. I do not blame the young people for this. This is not their fault. So let's deal with that one. The problem here is the system that we have means that student accommodation is not taxed for council tax. So the more student properties that you put up, you don't get that extra revenue stream going into local councils to pay for some of the services that are provided for not just the students but for everyone, really basic stuff such as recycling and bin collection, or for paying for the upkeep of roads, for example, that sort of stuff. So again, rather than just saying, oh, let's all start on the students, I'm not saying that. I'm actually saying, well, actually, let's have a look at our systems and processes and see if there is a different way of extracting some of the wealth that comes in. This could be actually targeting the individual businesses, but you need Acts of Parliament to do that, and I can't see the Treasury agreeing to any of that. You then have the lack of political desire to overhaul our systems, structures and processes to deal with what are persistent problems. This then is also reflected by, sorry, it's a little bit windy out here, is reflected by a lack of a mindset which within the institutions which says, okay, how do we think as a city? How do we behave as good civic citizens if we are looking, let's say, for example, the wealthy colleges of Cambridge University? What does Trinity College look like when it behaves in a manner where it's thinking about the future of the city, for example? How would it affect its future investment decisions? That sort of stuff. This then brings me on to really the final couple of things, which is the lack of imagination from big institutions who really just focus on, shall we say, doing things right rather than doing the right things, and not being able to think beyond either the things that affect them or that they affect directly, or seeing how they can influence actually what happens in the city. Now, during 2014, I put a number of these points to the City Council in public questions, and you'll see in the links below what the results of those questions were from 2014 after my election campaign with Puffles. And you can see in particular, and I don't blame, sorry, just tweak the camera a bit. I don't blame Councillors Herbert and Johnson for doing this, because they're fighting off Whitehall-inspired cuts. But they have basically said they have only got enough council resource to deal with the stuff that they're responsible for, and are thus not able to go beyond it. And this is where my challenge to the other wider civic institutions and city institutions is to say, come on, how can we all work together to take some of the burdens off the City Council, changing some of our systems and processes, and perhaps providing some additional resource to pay for employing the people who are needed, basically to make the city function much better than it currently is. Another example is your bog standard comms strategies. And again, in one of the links, you will see an example of the first Shadow City Deal board meeting where they had, as far as I was concerned, a bog standard comm strategy with a little wink to social media and a wave to Puffles. Yeah, it didn't really turn out too brilliantly if we do an evaluation on that, because all they did was they just took a bog standard comm strategy model and said, let's run with it. But again, in the grand scheme of things, they didn't have the staff in place to think far, far beyond and ask about how do we as a city, people in institutions, communicate with each other, and then say, what does that mean for what our consultation models should be? So thus we have a broken feedback loop where institutions fail time and again to learn from their activities or to learn from the good ideas that their staff and people who work with them and they work for have, and thus they fail to learn from their activities. You've just got this continually broken loop, which brings me really to my final point in all of this. I hope we get some movement on it, but I'm not hopeful on it, is young people are systematically excluded from everything that happens, even though they're the ones disproportionately affected by all of the decisions being taken. I'll leave it there. Food for thought. Keep an eye out for the 1st of September and the meeting of the Greater Cambridge City Deal Board, because it's going to be a big one. I'll see you soon.